Nina Martinez never imagined herself in a world of glittering chandeliers, crystal champagne glasses, and gowns that cost more than a year's rent. She had spent her life balancing two jobs, racing against time just to keep the electricity on, and ensuring her younger brother Mateo had food on the table. There was no space for luxury in her world, only survival. Yet life had a way of surprising her. It happened on an ordinary Wednesday evening when the mailbox held nothing but bills and a single, crisp white envelope that seemed completely out of place among the overdue notices. Nina frowned as she turned it over. The envelope was thick, embossed with gold lettering. She ran her fingers over the elegant script that spelled out her name, Miss Nina Martinez. There had to be a mistake. No one addressed her so formally, especially not in her rundown apartment complex. With a deep breath, she opened it. You are cordially invited to the Kingston Foundation Gala. Her heart skipped a beat. The Kingston Foundation was one of the most prestigious organizations in the country, known for funding scholarships for underprivileged students. She had spent years volunteering there, tutoring kids who, like her, came from nothing but dared to dream. But why would they invite her? Her eyes moved to the bottom of the invitation, and that's when the shock truly hit her. Signed, Liam Kingston. Nina's breath caught in her throat. Liam Kingston, a name that held weight in every business circle, whispered in admiration and envy. The elusive millionaire CEO of Kingston Enterprises, a man who never made public appearances unless absolutely necessary. He was a mystery wrapped in tailored suits in an empire worth billions. And yet, he had personally signed her invitation. Why? She sat down heavily on the couch, still staring at the elegant lettering, as if it might suddenly reveal its secrets. The sound of her best friend Maya's voice broke her trance. What's with the face? You look like you saw a ghost. Without a word, Nina handed her the invitation. She watched as Maya's eyes widened before she let out a squeal so loud it could have shattered glass. Oh my God, girl, this is huge! Maya practically jumped on the couch. You're going to a gala with the richest people in the city, and Liam Kingston signed it? Nina shook her head. I don't understand. I'm just a volunteer. Why would he? Maya threw up her hands. Who cares why? The point is, you have a golden ticket to the kind of event people like us only see in movies. She wiggled her eyebrows. And who knows? Maybe some rich guy will fall for you. Nina laughed despite herself. Maya, be serious. I am serious. Maya flopped down next to her, gripping her shoulders. Listen to me, Nina. All your life, people have told you what you can't do, where you don't belong. But guess what? This invitation says otherwise. She shook the paper. They want you there. Liam Kingston wants you there. Nina wanted to believe it, but a gnawing doubt whispered in her mind. She had spent her whole life fighting to be seen, to prove that where she came from didn't define her. But she had also learned that no matter how hard she worked, there were doors that people like her weren't meant to walk through. Her childhood was filled with moments of being told she wasn't enough, not wealthy enough, not sophisticated enough, not right enough for certain places. Would this gala be the same? Would she walk into a room full of people who saw her as an outsider, who whispered behind their champagne glasses, wondering who let the poor girl in? She exhaled shakily. I don't know, Maya. Maybe I should just… Nope, Maya interrupted. You're not backing out of this. Do you have any idea how many women in this city would sell their souls for an invitation like this? And you got one because of who you are. Nina bit her lip. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe she was overthinking. Maybe, just maybe, this was something good. Still, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her gut. She stared at the invitation one last time, her fingers tracing over Liam Kingston's name. Something about this felt bigger than just a charity event. Something told her that this night would be more than just a gala. It would be the beginning of something she never saw coming. A storm of emotions swirled in her chest. Excitement, fear, curiosity, and one undeniable truth. No matter what happened, after this night, her life would never be the same. The moment Nina stepped into the grand ballroom, she felt like an imposter. The space was nothing short of magical. Golden chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm, ethereal glow across the room. The walls were adorned with intricate gold-trimmed mirrors that reflected the glitz and glamour of the night. Elegant laughter drifted through the air, blending seamlessly with the soft notes of a live orchestra playing in the corner. Nina inhaled sharply. She did not belong here. Her hand instinctively clenched the fabric of her dress. The navy blue gown, simple yet beautiful, was one she had borrowed from Maya. It wasn't designer, not like the glittering gowns that the other women wore, but it was enough to make her feel like she had stepped out of her reality and into a fairy tale. Still, no gown could erase the feeling in her gut. Eyes were on her. She could feel them, sharp, curious, scrutinizing. Some were subtle, hidden behind polite smiles. Others weren't. A woman in a shimmering silver dress whispered behind a bejeweled hand to her companion, her gaze flickering to Nina's worn-out heels. A man in a tuxedo barely spared her a glance before dismissing her as unimportant. She had known this would happen. She had prepared herself for it, but preparation didn't make it hurt any less. She forced herself to take a step forward, then another. Each one felt heavier than the last. She needed air. She turned slightly, intending to head toward the terrace when she felt it. A gaze. It burned into her like a silent fire, strong and unwavering. Slowly she turned her head, and that was when she saw him, Liam Kingston. He stood across the room, tall and commanding in a sharp black tuxedo that fit him perfectly. His dark hair was styled effortlessly, and his piercing blue eyes, eyes that held an intensity she had never encountered before, were locked onto hers. Nina's breath hitched. There was something different about the way he looked at her. It wasn't judgment. It wasn't amusement. It was something else. Something that sent a strange, electric current through her body. Her fingers tightened around the fabric of her dress. Why was he looking at her like that? A part of her wanted to look away. Another part of her, one she didn't quite understand, refused to. Then, before she could even begin to decipher the moment, a deep voice interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Martinez!" She turned sharply, her heart nearly leaping out of her chest. Standing behind her was an older gentleman, his presence exuding quiet authority. He was dressed in a finely tailored black suit, and in his hand was a sleek silver earpiece, one that marked him as security. She swallowed hard. "Yes?" Her voice came out softer than she intended. "The host of the evening, Mr. Kingston, has requested your presence," he said smoothly. Her stomach twisted. Liam Kingston wanted to speak with her? A flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Was this a mistake? Had he noticed someone like her simply because she didn't belong? Maybe he wanted to personally ensure she found her way out before she embarrassed his event? Or maybe it was something else? Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. She hesitated, her feet suddenly rooted to the marble floor. The gentleman didn't push her, but his presence alone made it clear. This wasn't a request, it was an expectation. Nina's pulse quickened as she let her gaze drift back across the ballroom. Liam was still watching her. The world around them, the music, the whispers, the grandeur, faded into the background. For a moment it felt like it was just the two of them, standing on opposite ends of an invisible thread, pulling them toward each other. She exhaled shakily. Then, with no other choice, she nodded. "Lead the way." As she followed the security officer, weaving through the sea of wealth and power, her mind raced with a single, terrifying thought. Why would the most powerful man in the room want to talk to someone like her? She was about to find out, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for the answer. The world around her blurred. The laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, the distant hum of conversation. It all faded into nothingness as Nina stood frozen, staring at the hand extended before her. Liam Kingston, the most powerful man in the room, was asking her to dance. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. She felt the weight of 100 eyes pressing against her, some filled with shock, others with poorly concealed disdain. Women in dazzling gowns whispered behind their glasses, their jealousy sharp enough to cut through the thick air of luxury. Yet Liam's expression remained unchanged. He didn't waver. His gaze, deep and unwavering, held something unexpected. Not arrogance, not amusement. Warmth. For a moment, Nina forgot how to breathe. She had spent her life being overlooked, dismissed as just another nameless face in a crowd of struggle. She had never been the girl men fought over, never the one who turned heads when she walked into a room. And yet Liam Kingston, was standing before her, waiting. "Would you care for a dance?" His voice was deep, smooth like the soft melodies drifting through the ballroom. Every instinct told her to refuse, to step away, to reject whatever game this was before it could make her look foolish. But then she looked into his eyes. Something flickered there, something she couldn't name. Before she could talk herself out of it, she placed her hand in his. Liam's fingers closed around hers. Not too tightly, just enough to ground her in this impossible moment. Without a word, he led her onto the dance floor, guiding her with effortless grace. As the orchestra shifted into a soft, elegant waltz, Liam placed one hand on the small of her back, the other holding hers with a steadiness that sent her heart into a frantic rhythm. Nina had never been more aware of herself than she was now. Her every breath, every movement, every heartbeat felt magnified under his presence. She swallowed hard. "Why are you doing this?" Liam tilted his head slightly, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Dancing? This?" She gestured subtly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't belong here, Liam. People are staring." He didn't even glance at the crowd. "Let them stare." Nina exhaled, frustrated. "You don't understand." "I understand more than you think." His voice was quiet but firm. "And you belong here more than any of them." She wasn't sure why, but his words made her chest tighten. She looked away, focusing on the soft gliding of their steps. His movements were fluid, practiced. Hers were stiff, uncertain. But something about this felt familiar. Familiar in a way that made no sense. She frowned. "This isn't the first time we've danced, is it?" Liam's lips curled into something between a smile and a secret. "You don't remember me, do you?" His voice was softer now, a whisper just for her. A shiver ran down her spine. "Remember him?" She shook her head. "Should I?" His fingers tightened ever so slightly around hers, as if grounding himself. "I suppose not," he murmured. "It's been years." Nina's frown deepened. Years? What was he talking about? She searched his face for answers, but Liam Kingston was a fortress. His expression calm, unreadable. And yet there was something in his eyes, something deeper, something achingly familiar. Her heart pounded. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the music. Liam exhaled, a quiet chuckle escaping his lips. "I remember you, Nina," he said. "I've never forgotten you." Her breath caught. A strange, unsettling warmth spread through her chest. She should have laughed, should have denied it, should have told him he was mistaken. But something deep inside her, something she couldn't explain, told her he wasn't lying. She didn't understand it, but she felt it. Her fingers trembled slightly in his grasp. Who are you to me?" For a moment, Liam just looked at her, his gaze searching, measuring. Then as the music swelled, he leaned in. His breath was warm against her ear when he finally whispered the words that made her entire world shift. "You once saved my life." The floor beneath her seemed to vanish. Her pulse roared in her ears, drowning out everything. The music, the whispers, the weight of the moment. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Saved his life. Her mind raced. Was it possible? Had they met before? Had she done something, once, long ago, that had somehow changed the course of his life? The room spun. She was dancing with a stranger. And yet, he wasn't a stranger at all. The past had just knocked on her door, and she wasn't ready for what it had to say. Nina's mind spun, her breath uneven as Liam's words echoed in her head. "You once saved my life." Her fingers trembled in his as she searched his face for answers, for anything that would make sense of the impossible claim he had just made. She had never met Liam Kingston before. Had she? Liam's grip was steady, grounding her as he spoke again, his voice low and steady. "You were 12, he said. "I was just a boy, bullied for being different. You stood up for me in the alley behind our school. Do you remember? Nina inhaled sharply. The alley. A memory, long buried and nearly forgotten, stirred in the depths of her mind. The sound of cruel laughter. The sight of a small, terrified boy curled up against a brick wall. And then, her own voice. Leave him alone! Her heart pounded in her chest as the past unraveled before her eyes. Yes, yes, she remembered. It had been a gray, rainy afternoon in the rough neighborhood where she grew up. The alley behind the school had always been a danger zone, a place where kids settled grudges with fists instead of words. She had been walking home when she heard the sound of muffled cries. She had turned the corner and seen him. A small boy, no older than 10, crumpled against the cold brick wall. His uniform was torn, his pale skin smeared with dirt, and his piercing blue eyes, eyes that now belonged to the man standing before her, were filled with fear. 4 older boys surrounded him, shoving him back and forth like a rag doll, laughing as he struggled to fight back. Nina had felt rage explode inside her, burning hot and wild. She had never been the kind of girl to stand by and watch injustice happen, so she didn't hesitate. She had thrown her school bag down and charged into the fight. Her fists had been small, but her spirit had been fierce. She had grabbed the nearest bully by the collar, yanked him away, and swung at another one before they even saw her coming. You think you're tough? She had yelled. Try picking on someone who fights back. The bullies had been stunned at first, shocked that a girl was daring to interfere. But when Nina didn't back down, when she fought like a wildcat, they had finally retreated, spitting curses as they ran. And then there had been silence. The boy had looked up at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. Why did you help me? He had whispered. Nina had bent down, brushing the dirt from his torn shirt. Because no one deserves to be treated like they don't belong, she had said. Don't ever let them make you feel like you're nothing. She had smiled at him then, warm and reassuring. What's your name? She had asked. But before he could answer, a voice had called from down the street, and he had bolted, disappearing before she could ever see him again. She had never thought about that day again, until now. Until Liam Kingston stood before her, watching her with an expression so raw, so vulnerable, it made her heart ache. The boy from the alley, the boy she had saved, had been him. Her breath hitched as realization crashed over her like a tidal wave. You! She barely found her voice. That was you? Liam nodded, his lips curving into the softest smile. That was me, Nina. A lump formed in her throat. She had saved him, and he had never forgotten. Liam, Her voice broke. There was too much to process, too much emotion swelling inside her, making it hard to breathe. You were the first person who ever fought for me, he said quietly. The first person who made me feel like I mattered. His fingers tightened around hers, his warmth seeping into her skin. You changed everything for me that day. Nina shook her head, overwhelmed. But I didn't even know who you were. I knew who you were, he said simply, and I've loved you ever since. Her breath caught in her throat. The words hung between them, soft but unshakable. He had loved her since that day. Nina felt her heart slam against her ribs. The powerful, untouchable CEO, the man who could have anything and anyone, had spent years holding on to a memory of her. A simple girl from the wrong side of town, a girl who had never thought twice about standing up for someone in need. And now, after all these years, he was standing in front of her, offering her his heart. Tears burned behind her eyes, the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. This was more than fate. This was something deeper, something that had been waiting to be uncovered. She had saved his life once, and now he had returned to change hers forever. Nina's eyes filled with tears, blurring her vision as Liam's words, his confession, echoed in her heart. He had loved her since she was 12. Her mind was spinning, her chest tight with emotions she didn't know how to handle. She couldn't believe it. This was Liam Kingston, the wealthy, powerful man who could have anyone in the world, who had built an empire of success. And he was standing here, telling her that he had never forgotten her, the girl who had helped him when he was just a boy lost and alone. But before she could speak, before she could find the words to express the rush of emotions flooding her, she heard it. a cruel, sneering voice that cut through the delicate moment like a blade. "She doesn't belong here." Nina's heart stuttered. She turned her head, following the voice. Standing near the edge of the ballroom was a tall, beautiful woman, Veronica Hastings, the daughter of a wealthy senator. Veronica was dressed in a sparkling silver gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, her blonde hair perfectly styled, and her lips painted a shade of red that matched the venom in her eyes. Veronica was looking at Nina with a cold, disgusted expression, her lips curled into a sneer. A girl like her, poor, unpolished, and from the wrong side of town, doesn't deserve to be here, let alone dance with a Kingston. The room seemed to freeze. It was as if time itself had taken a pause, leaving only the weight of her words hanging in the air. Nina's breath caught in her throat. She had heard these words before, back when she was young and struggling, when people like Veronica would whisper behind her back or look at her with contempt. She felt the sting of judgment wash over her like a cold wave. Her heart sank. The shame, the old feeling of not belonging, swept over her again. The memories of being made to feel like she was invisible, like she wasn't worthy of attention, came flooding back. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear into the shadows, to hide from the judging eyes of the room. She could feel the weight of their gazes on her, their silent judgment making her skin burn. But before she could move, before she could step away, as she always had in the past, something unexpected happened. The ballroom fell into a heavy silence. The music had stopped. The laughter had ceased. There was only the sharp sound of Nina's heartbeat in her ears. Veronica's face had turned crimson, her lips parted in indignation, her hands clenched at her sides. "She's just—" Veronica started, her voice dripping with disdain, but Liam interrupted her sharply. "She's the woman I love." The words rang out like a thunderclap, echoing in the room, carrying a force that cut through the tension like a knife. "I won't tolerate discrimination in my presence." Nina's breath caught in her throat. His words were firm, unyielding, and they held an authority that demanded attention. His voice was not just a declaration to Veronica. It was a challenge to everyone in the room who had ever looked down on her, who had judged her for the color of her skin, for the place she had come from. The silence lingered. Veronica opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The powerful woman, so accustomed to being the center of attention, was rendered speechless. Some of the other guests, those who had once looked at Nina with thinly veiled contempt, shifted uneasily, their heads lowering in shame. A few even avoided her gaze altogether, perhaps realizing the weight of their own prejudices in the face of Liam's unwavering defense. But it wasn't just shame that they felt, it was something else. Respect. For the first time, Nina could feel it. It wasn't the hollow, condescending kind that some wealthy people offered out of politeness. It wasn't the pity that had often been directed her way. This respect was real, earned. She could see it in the eyes of the people around her. They were looking at her differently now, not as the poor girl from the wrong side of town, but as someone who deserved to be seen, valued, and respected. Nina's chest swelled with emotion. She had fought for this her whole life. She had fought for equality, for dignity, for the right to stand tall in a world that constantly tried to push her down. She had fought against the shame that followed her, the feeling that she wasn't enough simply because of where she came from. But now here was Liam Kingston, a man with all the wealth and power the world could offer, standing by her, fiercely declaring that she did belong. Her throat tightened as she looked into his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "You don't have to do this for me." Liam smiled, a look of pure sincerity in his gaze. "I'm not," he said. "I'm doing this for us." The words settled deep within Nina's heart. For the first time in her life, she realized something she had never truly understood before. Liam hadn't chosen her because of her worth in terms of wealth or status. He hadn't chosen her because she was from a noble family or because she had anything to offer him in return. He had chosen her because of the person she was. He had cared about her, not because she was a poor girl from a rough neighborhood, but because she was Nina, the girl who had once stood up for him when no one else would. Liam Kingston had loved her from the moment he had realized what her heart was capable of. Her compassion, her courage, her ability to make people feel seen, and he had never stopped loving her. Nina felt her heart swell as she held his gaze, the weight of his declaration slowly sinking in. She didn't need to be anyone else. She didn't need to fit some mold or meet some standard of wealth or privilege to be worthy of love. She was enough, just as she was. The thought was liberating. Liam reached out, taking her hand in his once more, his touch warm and grounding. For a long moment they stood there side by side, facing the crowd. And in that silence, a new understanding settled in the room. It wasn't just Liam's words that had made an impact. It was the action behind them. The act of choosing love over fear, choosing kindness over cruelty, choosing equality over prejudice. For Nina, it was a moment of personal liberation. But for the people in that room, it was a turning point. They could no longer look at her as the other, the outsider. They had seen her for who she truly was. They had witnessed Liam's unwavering support, and in doing so, they had been forced to confront their own biases and prejudices. Nina looked at Liam, her heart full of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Liam smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No need to thank me. It was never about doing something for you. It was about doing what was right." And in that moment, Nina realized that this was love. Not the kind based on wealth or status, not the kind that came with conditions, but the kind that saw someone for who they truly were, the kind that stood against injustice, and the kind that was willing to break the chains of prejudice, no matter the cost. The days following the gala felt like a whirlwind. The world had shifted in ways Nina couldn't have imagined. What had started as an evening of nerves and uncertainty had turned into the beginning of something life-changing. A love story that would be told for years to come. The media couldn't get enough of the story. Headlines splashed across newspapers and magazines. Millionaire defends the woman he loves against discrimination. A love that defies all odds. Liam Kingston and Nina Martinez, breaking barriers. Some people criticized Liam, calling him naive, reckless even, for standing up against the powerful elite in such a public way. Others, however, praised him for using his wealth and influence to challenge the systemic prejudice that had been silently ruling over their city for far too long. But despite the criticism, the majority of the reactions were positive. Nina's name became a symbol of strength, of overcoming the odds, and of standing up for what was right. People reached out to her, students, teachers, even parents, thanking her for showing them that love, kindness, and respect had the power to dismantle years of prejudice. It wasn't just a story about a woman who was once overlooked. It was about the power of human connection, the ability to see beyond superficial labels, and the courage to defy societal expectations. Liam, with all his resources and influence, didn't back down. He knew what he had to do. He had seen firsthand how education could open doors, how opportunities could change the course of someone's life. And so, with Nina by his side, he used his wealth to create scholarships for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. These scholarships gave them access to a world of possibilities, just like the one he had been given when he was a child, when he had been saved by a girl he never forgot. Nina didn't stop working either. She continued her job, tirelessly advocating for underprivileged communities. But now, with Liam beside her, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they visited schools, held workshops, and created platforms for young voices to be heard. The barriers she had spent so long fighting against were starting to crumble, one story at a time. But it wasn't just their work that changed. Their relationship grew stronger each day. Every moment they spent together reminded Nina of what was possible when love led the way. They traveled to places Nina had only dreamed of. They had quiet dinners, long walks through the city, and endless conversations about the world and their dreams. There was no judgment between them, no societal barriers to cross, just a deep, unshakable connection built on trust and shared experiences. One evening, after a long day of meetings and community outreach, Liam and Nina stood together on the balcony of their home, watching the city as the sun began to set, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold. The world seemed to pause around them. The hustle, the noise, the struggle, it all felt distant in that quiet moment. Nina took a deep breath, her heart full of gratitude. She had never imagined that she would find herself here, at the center of such a love. Love that defied expectations. Love that challenged the status quo. Liam turned to her, his face soft with affection, and took her hand in his. His gaze held hers with a depth that went beyond words. "I loved you then," he whispered, his voice low and steady. "I love you now, and I'll love you forever." Tears welled in Nina's eyes as she gazed at him. Her heart felt as though it might burst from the overwhelming warmth and tenderness she felt in this moment. She had always believed in the power of love, but now she truly understood its transformative ability, how it could heal wounds, break chains, and build bridges where there had once been walls. "I love you," she replied softly, her voice thick with emotion. "More than I ever thought was possible." As they stood together, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Nina realized that the world had changed, not just for her, but for the people they were helping, for the students who now had a chance at a better future, for everyone who would one day hear their story and be inspired to love without limits. In the end, it wasn't the wealth or the power that mattered, it was the heart. Love had conquered prejudice. Love had proven that no matter where you come from or who you are worthy of happiness, of respect, and of belonging. And most importantly, love always wins.